Welcome to Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. You can find us at LCARA.net, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. If you're enjoying the videos we're producing here at LCARA, please help our club out by hitting that subscribe button. Also, give us some feedback on our videos. Click the like button, share with anybody who may find it interesting, and be sure and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified of the next video release.
We have all encountered the rude and arrogant ham radio operator. We found one such individual. We've hidden his face to protect his identity. The following discussion will make it abundantly clear why. When you're finding a station to work, what do you do first? Once I find a station, I tune my radio for the strongest possible signal. You tune on the same frequency as the station you're trying to contact? Well, of course. Do you mentor others in the amateur radio hobby? Why? Nobody mentored me. How often do you log your contacts or send a QSL card to those you meet on the air? What's a QSL card? I don't have time for that nonsense. You seem upset. Do you ever lose patience with contacts, or do you try to make them feel important? Important? I'm not their babysitter. Would you describe your interest in the ham radio hobby as a way to help others? You have got to be kidding me. A hobby? I use my radio to make money. One last question. Do you belong to any amateur radio clubs, or do you participate in any community-based activities? Heck no, I'm a loner. I don't use my radio for anyone but me. Who else would I use it for? It's my radio. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Please don't be this guy. Hello there, I'm KY4BDP Brian for the Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. Today I wanted to talk about something that was handed to me by one of the Elmers in our club, and it's the Amateur Radio Operator's Code of Ethics. Now, as you just saw in the interview, there are some operators out there that, shall we say, are not looking out for the interests of others. And we see some of that especially if you're up on some of the lower bands, that are probably not as polite as they could be, or in some cases they are a little standoffish. But in a lot of the other bands, you have a lot of people out there that really care about the hobby. And I thought this code of ethics was definitely something to have a video on, because I don't really see it emphasized by some of the other channels. Not that they probably don't care about this, they do, but I thought, well, why not quantify that and put out a video? Because really everybody should live by this code of ethics. By the way, I've got a piece of paper here that I'm going to read. If you want a copy of this, put it down in the comments below, and maybe cut it out and put it someplace where it's easy to see in your station, at your shack, or in your shack, so that you can kind of remind yourself each day. Just look at one of the code of ethics and see how you might quantify that day when you're DXing. So let's get started. I don't want to make this video overly long. The first ethic that I think is really pertinent is the amateur is considerate. He never knowingly uses the air in such a way as to lessen the pleasure of others. Now, probably one of the best examples my brother and I are always complaining about, but everybody complains about this, is somebody will find a station. Usually they're watching a waterfall. They come all the way over to a station, and then they tune their radio as soon as they're right on top of the station where others are already on and communicating. And you hear this extremely loud pitch because they're tuning their radio. And that's definitely not improving the pleasure of others. It is definitely lessening the pleasure of others. That's definitely something you don't want to do, is tune your radio right on frequency where others happen to be, for instance. So it's definitely a great example of what not to do. There are plenty of other things you could certainly do to improve the experience for others, especially new people. The next ethic, the amateur is loyal. She or he offers loyalty and encouragement and support to all radio amateurs, local radio club, and to the American Radio Relay League through which amateur radio is represented. Now, you could say, well, I'm not really big in the ARRL. That's totally understandable. A couple of the Elmers that I know in my local club are life members. The ARRL is our lobby in Washington to ensure that the bands that we have stay in amateur radio. Some of you have probably heard that here just recently in the last year in particular, they were looking to reapportion some of the 2-meter band for commercial aviation use. And we fought that both through the ARRL and the IRL. So these organizations are there to represent us. Are they perfect? No, I don't know of any organization that's perfect, but we still need a lobby that helps our hobby maintain what we have and to help grow what we have as well. So the ARRL certainly does that. If you have a state organization that you like to work with, great. We're not picky. Just pick one that you feel helps grow the hobby. The other thing it says is loyal to a radio club. You hear Chris and I talk about this all the time. Find a local club that you can participate in. Many radio operators are loners. Now, I don't have a problem with that. People have different personalities. Some people don't like to be around people. I get that. And amateur radio allows you to kind of get out there and touch people. In essence, you're meeting people, just not in person. And during this epidemic or pandemic as it is, you could argue that amateur radio is one of the first ways to do social distancing, I suppose. The point is, though, is a club helps you with knowledge and mentoring, helps build you up as a ham radio operator. I can't tell you how much wisdom I've gotten from the Elmers in our club based on all kinds of the activities that we're involved in, from field days to installing repeaters to doing maintenance, whatever it might be. We're just starting an activity with our club, for instance, hands-on with LCARA, and that's where we're going to start building things, teaching things once a month with members of the club, and it's to share that information. Well, that's being loyal too. You'd want to be loyal to a club that helps you grow in the hobby. The next one is the amateur is progressive. Now, keeping the amateur's station abreast of science, the station is well built and efficient. Operating practice is always above reproach. Now, again, building a station that you're proud of is an important thing. Absolutely. In fact, we've got a new member in our club, and he's got one of the coolest stations I've seen. He's built it all himself. I'm really impressed. In fact, I'm envious because my station's pretty, shall we say, doesn't look like much of a shack, but it's there. This fellow's built the bench himself, built his work area himself, and it just looks great. That's being progressive, is taking your hobby seriously, and when you have a nice shack, you want to use it. If you don't have a nice shack, you find other things to do sometimes. The other thing I like about this is keeping the amateur station abreast of science. Now, we ourselves don't have to be scientists, but we have to learn a few things. We have some folks that they just do the nets, which hit repeaters. So they're not worried about long distance contacts, but you have to know a little bit about doing the programming of your radio and making sure that you have an antenna that's appropriate for repeater communications. Then we have others that want to do that and more, like HF, where you have to learn a little bit about topography. You have to learn a little bit about propagation and other disciplines as well when it comes to grounding and RFI. So I like that saying, the amateur is progressive, meaning that you're willing to take on additional knowledge and learn so that your radio station, your shack, is efficient, well built, and I would add to that, safe. The next one is the amateur is friendly, and I can't emphasize that one enough. She or he is slow and patient, sending when requested. Friendly advice and counsel to the beginner, kindly assistance, cooperation, and consideration for the interests of others. These are the marks of the amateur spirit. Folks, I used to work in public radio, or shall we say commercial radio, here locally in my community. No, I'm not a licensed commercial radio operator. I did the IT, but I was another voice to help with commercials, do remotes, things like that. Commercial radio is there to make money for sure, but one of the other things that I learned working at a commercial radio station was how community oriented it is. That's part of the charter. Well, amateur radio is almost like from the get-go community oriented from the standpoint of helping out your community in times of stress or some type of an event where amateur radio really comes in handy for communications, whether that's a storm, a hurricane, an earthquake, tornado, whatever it might be, even a pandemic like we're going through right now. Amateur radio is meant to be there as a way to help others, to give back to the community. That's how I look at it, is giving back to the community. There's a lot of personal satisfaction in learning this, but ultimately the YouTube videos, the emergency communications trailer, the maintenance of the repeaters is giving back to the community so that that service is there when it's needed. The amateur is balanced. I thought this was kind of, I don't know, not strange, but I thought it was interesting they added that. Radio is a hobby. Now, as we saw in the interview, not so much, but he or she never allows it to interfere with any of the duties he or she owes to their home, their job, their school, or their community. You don't want something to just take over your life. Chris and I, KY4CKP, have a lot of interests. We're both in IT. We both like certain aspects of prepping. We both like ham radio, of course. We also like other interests that we don't get into on this channel because it's not appropriate. But balanced is a key element. When you get older, but you don't have to be older to experience this, you're looking for ways to invest your time because you only get one life. And that time investment, you want to get enjoyment out of. So balanced, yes, but not to the exclusion of other things that are just as important, your family, your community, and others. And the last ethic here, which I really groove on, is the amateur is patriotic. Knowledge and station are always ready for the service of the country and the community. The emergency communications trailer is a great example of that. There are a lot of folks in our community that work for us every day. First responders, the armed forces, our hospital workers, and so forth. They're there serving us every day. Amateur radio is there for a very similar purpose. A lot of times we overlook that because we're not under any kind of an emergency. But right now is one such type. If the phone system goes down or is overloaded, and everybody uses cell phones today, very few people have landlines. Amateur radio could be a way of ensuring that somebody could communicate with their family at a distant location. Again, having that ability to communicate when things are not perfect is a big part of what we do. But in addition to that, it allows us to show to give back to our community in a patriotic way. Most of us in the ham radio hobby are very patriotic. I'm a former Marine, always a Marine, so to speak, served 6 years. You betcha I'm patriotic. Ham radio is a way to reach out to others, meet others that have also been in the military, but anybody really, and show that you're proud of your country. When I make a contact with somebody in another country, I'm representing my country. They're talking to an American who believes in freedom and individual rights. Not that we're evangelizing that, but they know just by listening to us that we're very proud and we're very patriotic of our country. So the amateur is patriotic. I like that they added that in there. Folks, if you want a copy of these ethics as something that you could put at your station to remind you why you're in the hobby, it's not about being rude. It's not about making money. It's not about using the radio in a negative way. It's about serving your community, serving others, and getting enjoyment yourself from a hobby that has so much to give and has been around a very long time, and putting a modern spin on it as well. If you would like a copy, put a request down in the comments. We'll be more than happy to send you a copy of the Amateur Radio Operators Code of Ethics. Hope you enjoyed the video. For the Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association, I'm KY4BDP 73.